So tell me, one of your first jobs?
One of my first jobs there was at Sunflower Cable, and
Oh, whoa.
actually, I brought my daughter to campus about 2 years ago, and so we stopped by the old building. But a bunch of us that worked in the television department worked at Sunflower because they did 6 and 10 news reports, and so I was actually doing um, videotaping the men's basketball games on the court, doing courtside highlights, and then going into the locker room and doing interviews, post-game interviews. So that's when Danny Manning was there, and they won the national championship. Um, the sad part for me is that I actually left campus like midway through the season, so I didn't get to
Oh,
cover the
no.
championship, which was just in Kansas City. But I mean, it was still fun just when Danny Manning was there the entire time, and just so much fun to be kind of courtside, if you will, and then going into the locker rooms. But I actually called my mom at one time and I said, I'm learning so much more at Sunflower Cable than I am in class. And to which she replied, no, 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 you got to get your degree. Um, so I stayed on and listened to her and got my degree. But Sunflower Cable was, I don't know if it's still doing anything now, but it was just,
It's changed. It was bought out, and now what you remember as Channel 6, it was at one time Wow, was the name of the company, and then Wow either sold or got bought out by the current company, which is called, oh shoot, I'm blanking on the name, but they're out of South Dakota. And
yeah.
unfortunately, they stopped doing that news broadcast that you're talking about. I mean, when I moved to Lawrence, I watched the local Channel 6 news all the time,
Uh-huh.
and they stopped doing that. They closed that down. Now they still do have a channel here in town. Oh, it's called
Okay.
Midcoast, but they're almost entirely dedicated to sports. So they do a lot of the Jayhawk broadcasts, things like that. But in terms of the other programming, like we had a late night show, local, we had local TV or news reports. We had a local cooking show, Janie's Kitchen. All of that is
Uh-huh.
unfortunately gone. So how did you? Can you just maybe give a brief,
Yeah.
like how did you get from Sunflower doing that work that you just talked about to where you are now? And can maybe tell us what it is you do now?
Um, well, right now I actually pandemic kind of as it is that I'm working for Access Hollywood with NBC,
Mm-hmm.
which I initially did from 96 to 2011, got laid off. Um, but then the old EP of that show has started a new show with People Magazine. And so a bunch of people with Access Hollywood left to follow the old EP that's now with People Magazine. So, but I got a call from uh, an audio technician who's still with the show, and he said, "Murph, you got to come back in because you know the show. You can step right in." And I had actually been freelancing. I
Mm-hmm.
never burnt that bridge with Access, and they laid me off in 2011, but I kept working for them as a freelancer occasionally. They had the live show would come in, and we'd do it from the Rockefeller Plaza. And so I had a week worth of work when the live show would come in, but I just always knew the production manager there, and just never burnt that bridge. And so when the DP that was still there said, "Hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to People Magazine to follow Rob Silverstein." Um, the audio guy called me up. His A2, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
called me up and said, "Murph, you got to come back in." Um, but it's I'm still like kind of cautious into where this COVID thing's going because people have been furloughed. Um, but I think it was kind of important for me, and I've done so much work with NBC
Mm-hmm.
um, in sports, entertainment, in news. I did some stuff with nightly news, um, and it's been kind of a wild ride being in New York, and I'm kind of still a little awestruck that walking in around Rockefeller Center and Radio City and the history there. It's kind of special.
Is there a particular moment in your career that you're most proud of? Something you'd maybe point to as, really a pivotal moment for you?
There are several, I think. I kind of look back. I used to work for CNN in Los Angeles at their LA news bureau, and I kind of call that my war years. From 92 to 96, the city was under FEMA for fires, floods, earthquakes, riots, and the O.J. Simpson trial.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of an amazing time to work in news and cover all that stuff. Actually, being in Hawaii and standing over the body of Marcos from the Philippines, the dictator from the Philippines.
Yeah, sure.
Then when his body was being returned to the Philippines, they had been in exile in Hawaii. And when he passed away, I was sent over there, and we were actually in a high school gym, and all these expats from the Philippines they were having this ceremony and funeral, I guess, if you will. And so I'm up on a high school stage with the coffin, and Marcos, his body is lying in state there, if you will. And I'm kind of like leaning over the coffin getting shots. And I'm like, this is so bizarre. And also covering the Nixon funeral. As a kid, knowing the administration in the 70s and being at summer camp in 73 and hearing his resignation, and then just being at his Yorba Linda, his home there where they had the funeral. And it was just, seeing that whole administration just kind of like walk through, and it's kind of bizarre to me at the time. How
does being a Jayhawk, how has it come into your work? Is you encounter other Jayhawks, you've been in news and entertainment and sports. Do people, sometimes go ahead.
Yeah. For me, when I first started off, I immediately went back to Boston. But I had kept in contact with this couple, Odie Welch, who works in LA, and his wife, Melody. And they were classmates of mine. And they had eventually settled out in Los Angeles. And when I was in Boston, we kept in contact, and they kept on saying to me, when are you coming out to LA? When are you coming out to LA? And I was in a job there. And so it never kind of came about until finally I went after a field shooting job. And the company I was working for said, sorry, we're looking for people with network experience. And I said, thank you very much. I'm going to be on my way. And I finally called Mel on OD, and I said, I'm coming out. And that was October of 91. And they had bought a house, and they had some extra rooms. And so they put me up for 3 months in Stevenson Ranch, California, which is just north of LA. And so I stayed with them until I got a job with CNN. But I think just staying in touch with, my classmates was, an immense help, and really kind of got me going. It diversified where I'd been working, been at KU, had been in Boston, and then now out LA. So kind of got to see more of the country and work. When I was at CNN, I traveled all over the West Coast, and like I said, Hawaii, and actually covered the what's the word? Hopefully you're going to edit this.
Yeah. So yeah, we won't share anything until we get you be like, yeah, that looks good.
Yeah. In my travels, I went to all as far as Texas, to Waco, Texas, and covered the David Koresh.
Oh yeah.
And
the Branch Davidian.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was, traveling and was an immense kind of experience. Are
you from Boston originally, John?
Yeah.
How did you get out to KU? How'd you get to Lawrence?
Okay.
That's a question I got. I'm from upstate New York. I get asked that question all the time. I feel
like
from the East Coast.
My family had a farm just in Newton, Kansas.
Oh,
started by a great grandfather who homesteaded. And so my dad was kind of raised on that farm. My grandfather was the superintendent of Oswego schools. Um, but my brothers and sisters, my older brother and my older sister went to KU. And I was actually at another school at Franklin Pierce up in New Hampshire, kind of messing around as a freshman. Then I went to my brother's graduation after my freshman year. He was finishing up at KU, and just the whole spectacle of the graduation, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And I was like, time to stop messing around, time to come to KU. And so then I waited that I didn't go that fall semester. I think it was the spring semester of '83.
okay.
But and then just finally settled down and started, hitting the books and taking TV classes, and it's kind of the rest was kind of history. Mike, Mike Burke, my professor, my TV professor, Michael Burke. He's now in St. Louis, and just really kind of instrumental in the TV classes. I took a number of classes with him, and just really kind of guided us along. Great professor, and remember him. And actually, I was at the Stanley Cup Finals between the Bruins and St. Louis, and I was kicking myself because I never reached out to him. I was in St. Louis a number of times, and afterwards, I suddenly realized, oh, he's in St. Louis because we're Facebook friends or LinkedIn. I'm not sure which, but he's just a professor that I remember, and
that's
great
great.
guy.
It's good to have those people. I mean, even if there's some distance or what have you, those people that I have them too, professors that mean so much in like helping you figure out your trajectory or what have you. So I think that I guess maybe my last question, John, is, so you're behind the camera, right? In many of these jobs, or all of these jobs that you listed, for students that are interested in who see themselves in media, who see themselves in entertainment, who want to work in sports, in the field, the media field that you've been in. Do you have any suggestions for students that are in school right now to break into those spaces? What should they be working on?
I'm sorry?
What should they be working on?
Well, I think their contacts, start with their classmates, and as you progress or as they progress, if they're kind of in that field that you want to work in, that you stay in touch. I'm certainly with gonna edit this again.
Yeah.
And certainly with Odie Welch,
Yeah.
that I went to class with. They brought me along. But then there are people that you might meet I met Dave Mazza, who's with NBC Sports. He's like one of their chief engineers. I met him in Boston when I first moved back to Boston, and always kind of stayed in touch with him. He's in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame, if not the overall Broadcasting Hall of Fame. But I always stayed in touch with him, and for whatever, he's so big within the hierarchy of NBC, and I call him every time I've called him. I pretty much had a job the next day.
Yeah. So that networking, like building.
Yeah, networking is like so essential. But if you want to get into a certain, like if you want to do in sports, or you want to go into news, I think you need to diversify, and I think that this pandemic has certainly taught me that, and it's helped me that. And that's I freelanced from 2011 to till now, and that diversification of being able to do news or sports or entertainment, or even corporate. I've done a bunch of corporate work, and whereas one entity might slow down, you can go to another entity that's still moving along, and that might be not just within broadcasting, but because I know a bunch of guys that are in broadcasting that haven't worked since March.
Mhm.
And so that might be, you might have to diversify your job skills, maybe outside of broadcast, or, getting into entertainment, into feature type work, um, or if you're doing features, maybe you're doing corporate but I think diversification, you really need to diversify
Yeah.
your skill set so that, if sports, I mean, I left KU thinking I was going to get involved in features, and it is kind of important to follow your dream and your passion. And the more work that you put into that when you're younger, that you're going to see dividends later. But I was kind of lucky that I didn't know that Dave Mazza, I was going to get involved in sports when I met him back in '88. We were working at this news channel in Boston for the Christian Science Monitor. But Dave had a background in sports. Not that I really thought that I was going to hit him in that regard or in that vein. But I've done so much with NBC Sports in covering Stanley Cup Finals, the Super Bowl, and the NFL. I've got my Thursday Night Football.
I was going to ask. So, are you still freelancing with NBC Sports?
I'm still working on Football Night in America on Sunday nights, the pregame show, and I've met a director, Mike Sheehan, who's like the overall kind of design director. He does the Olympics as well. I've covered like 9 Olympic games.
Wow.
So I've done a ton with sports. I didn't really set out looking like, hey, the reason I actually went to Dave was because a lot of my leads were in news. Actually, my older brother had worked at the cable channel in Salina, Kansas, doing news. He was a broadcast journalism. So he was doing like the news reports in Salina, Kansas. And both of us were sports interns at WBZ in Boston while we were undergrads. So I thought I was going to get into news. But a lot of those old BZ people I stayed in contact with. And so I just kind of like fell into NBC Sports. I think I started talking about this. NBC Sports relocated its whole sports entity from 30 Rock to Stamford, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut was offering tax deductions for production at the time. And so I just called up Dave and I said, Dave, what's going on in Stamford? And pretty much I got called in for an interview and started working there. If you're lucky enough to find someone within, pretty high up in the echelon of broadcasting, and you have that contact, and that's pretty special. But I've told Dave I owe more to him in my career than to any other individual.
So the last thing I have to ask is, so when you go out on Sunday night, do you go out on Sunday Night Football, or are you working from home on editing, that type of thing?
Basically, I'm in the studio doing the cameras in the studios.
Okay.
But we also, when the playoffs come, we go out to the stadiums, and I do ENG work, and the sideline. We build like a stage on the sidelines and do the cameras there. But I'll go off and get shots, pregame shots around the city. We used to do Thursday Night Football, and I used to travel for that to all the stadiums. I do have to say, and this is pretty important about sports, it's nights and weekends.
Yeah.
So if there's a lot of guys that, working in sports that don't, 2 words save marriages, from what I've talked to other guys. It's direct deposit. Because there's a lot of times you're gone on nights, and my brother actually, who went to KU, his 2 kids were like, Dad, you're never home. And so he's like, okay, I'm getting out of sports. So you got to do it when you're young, and hopefully you can, work your way or have an understanding. I have an understanding wife because she worked in the business in publicity. So she gets production and how crazy it can be.
Okay.
But that's a tough thing to kind of overcome, is just, you're not going to be around on weekends, and you're not going to be home at night when your kids come home from school or whatever.
Well, this has been great. Maybe we'll see you in Kansas City if the Chiefs can hold on to that number one seed in the AFC. We'll see.
Yeah, I've been to the stadium a few times. I hate it.
Why? Why?
It's old. There's only it's
Mm.
there was some snowstorm that came through, I guess, when they played Indiana, that snowstorm during the playoffs like 2 seasons ago. And it was just all the trucks are outside the stadium. Like all these new stadiums like Minnesota, they can drive the trucks inside the stadium.
Yeah,
But
you know what I think in I did a dissertation on stadiums. Not just about games and sports, but about the ways in which universities, other organizations, political entities use stadiums to share values, history with fans, constituents, and help people through various like ways realize obligations to that shared history, right? And so I did a lot of research on stadiums, and one of the things I was kind of surprised to learn is um, that originally that Kauffman complex, the original design, I don't know if you've ever heard this, was supposed to have a roof on wheels that could go from the K over to Arrowhead. It was like an early prototype of domed of stadiums, but they were going to have this one be mobile so it could serve both complexes. And I think the thing that probably saves Arrowhead and saves the K is that it's single use stadiums. All those other stadiums that got built at that time, Riverfront, Veterans in Philly, Shea, well, Shea's not a good example. There are others though, right? They
yeah,
all have gone the way of the dinosaur. And I think that's partially because the architecture wasn't right and they were mixed use stadiums.
right.
And so we've gone back to these single use, and Kansas City had that right, since whenever those stadiums were built, I guess in the 60s.
Yeah. I kind of that's when we went to Korea for the Olympics. One of our first assignments was going through Seoul to all the old stadiums,
Oh,
um,
wow.
and the main Olympic stadium still in use. But you pull up to it and it's a concrete solid stadium. Probably couldn't it would take dynamite to get rid of it. But they were still using it for soccer,
Mm.
men's soccer league, and there's a baseball stadium next to that. And I think maybe Seoul was probably the first start of what they do now is they build all the stadiums within a park,
Hmm.
so they can get all the traffic, all the people that are buying tickets that they can be in, walking in a plaza all around the stadiums. But and they're still using the aquatic area for kids were taking swim lessons there, and they were turning one of the stadiums into a K-pop stadium.
Hmm.
But it was kind of like, hey, because what's happening now with these Olympic stadiums is they're just temporary, and
Yes.
these cities are spending fortunes on building these temporary stadiums, and they're not being reused.
Yes.
But
Oh,
Seoul was just the opposite of that. It was kind of fun to look up and see an old analog clock above the seats, and actually to walk into the doping room where Ben Johnson was taken into, and his medal was stripped from him.
that's
But
right. 80, 88, 88
yeah,
Seoul Olympics.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Sure. Remember
and
that.
this, I don't know if this helps you, and I don't want to take you away from your kids, but
No, no, no. It's okay.
walking into Minnesota and these stadiums, they're cathedrals. It's especially there's so much glass,
Hmm.
um, that in Minnesota it's so immense. They're literally cathedrals, and especially like in Dallas and just massive undertakings. Um, that's kind of interesting. Dallas is because I'm pretty damn sure that they roll out turf for different teams. Like the Cowboys have their own turf, and they
I'm
just
not
get these
surprised by
trucks.
that at all, actually. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean they roll up. I've seen they'll roll up the turf and on these big spindles and go put it underneath, and it's all stored underneath. And for like the Cotton Bowl, they'll bring out a different turf.
Yeah. It could have been a broadcast you worked on. I think that there was a Sunday night game the Raiders were in, and they were hosting in Vegas. And I caught on the broadcast that that's natural grass in that domed, stadium that they have there. They roll it out, put it outside,
Yeah,
and
Arizona.
manicure it outside, and then
Yep.
before the game, bring it in and roll it out inside.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're the first stadium to do that. Probably not, but it did strike me as unique.
Oh yeah, it's well back then, but I guess the Tottenham Hotspurs,
Yeah.
they just rebuilt the stadium where they do the same thing. They bring in the field from underneath. Uh,
Have you worked in because NBC, right, covers a lot of that Premier League, right, has the rights to broadcast Premier League in the United States. Have you done some games there?
I have not done the games there, but we have our talent has traveled over. They usually they'll use like the local guys,
Sure.
but our stage manager and some other folks have gone over with our talent. But I've done the games, the pre games, and the halftime shows in Stamford, Connecticut, and it's been a lot of fun. Kind of, this international sports as well. We used to do F1, and that was a lot of fun too. Got to learn to know the sport, gotten to know the Premier League and all the different aspects of that. So it's been kind of interesting working on international sports, Premiership rugby, and I covered that in Stanford, and then I've covered rugby here, United States rugby. There's a team on Coney Island, New York United, and so I've worked like a sideline camera on some of their games.
Been to Coney to ride the Cyclone, but I can't say that I've seen the rugby.
But I don't know if that is of interest. How these in Atlanta, that stadium is just massive. It's immense, and you look up in the roof and just this circular big screens and how the ceiling opens up. It's I just think of them as cathedrals. They're just
I think that and the way people are drawn to them and in the way in which they're devoted to the teams that play in them make that cathedral analogy, I think, even stronger. So it's not just like architect, it's almost spiritual for some people.
Yeah, it's in the way that they can put so many different entities within. Before I grew up with Fenway Park, and you could only get like a hot dog and popcorn, and there were little stands, kiosk, if you will, selling popcorn or beer. And so when I went out to LA and I went to Dodger Stadium, and then there's sushi and pizza, and now it's like there's whole restaurants within these stadiums.
Yeah.
And gift shops
and allergy-free zones, in some stadiums, like at Seattle, the Mariner Stadium, and Safeco is what I always think of it as, though I think it has a different corporate name now. But let's bring it back. This is my third.
Yeah, I'm sorry to take away from your family.
No. Like last question, I've asked 4 different times, but I'll bring it back, which is, just want to ask you what your favorite KU memory is. I would have guessed the '88 national championship, but you already said that you kind of left campus, mid-semester or mid-year, and weren't able to be on campus for that. So, favorite KU memory?
I mean, certainly camping out, because back when I was there was a student section right behind the KU bench, and so we would camp out right outside Allen Fieldhouse. If you got there early enough to be able to, there was maybe 100 seats back there. So you had to camp out to make sure that you could sit right behind the bench, which was awesome. To see that level of talent, national basketball programs, and for you to be basically courtside was awesome. And I think having that job at Sunflower, actually being on the court was just an awesome experience. I think that's, for the sports. We did rush the football. We didn't really watch or really go to until I remember my roommate and I, we were driving around campus and we were listening to the football game, and KU was playing Oklahoma. And that was, what's his name? The quarterback for OU, who's now on Fox Sports.
Wasn't the year that Troy Aikman was there.
Yes, exactly. So Troy Aikman is playing for Oklahoma before he transfers to UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're listening, KU's winning. And so we drive to the stadium. And once they opened up the end towards the Campanile, we rushed in. And so we tore down the goalposts with everyone else. But
wait, we beat Troy Aikman? We beat a Troy Aikman quarterback Oklahoma team? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right. Rock chalk.
And that's why. And then then they went to the rushing game, and Troy's like, "I'm out of here."
So that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So KU may have forced Aikman to UCLA, forced him out of Oklahoma. Probably more because they had more of a running game. But I think in terms of, I'm trying to give you something on education.
Well, you mentioned your professor,
Yeah, I'm thinking about, he was a younger guy at the time, but he was just pretty engaging. We did a movie over spring break called Shared Silence. We shot. O.D. Welch was like the producer on it. I still have the videotape. I don't know if it's in the archives somewhere, but I was the cameraman on that movie that was shot over spring break. And I think that was 1986. I'm not sure.
What was it about?
Oh my gosh. It was basically this family, and I think there was a death in the family, and it was basically how the family was coping with this death. But it was a period piece. So we had these costumes from like the 1800s, but Mike kind of put it all together, and O.D. Welch was also a producer on it. One of the Channel 6 news one of the Channel 6 news women came out and did a story on us. It was cold. It was March, so it was still cold. And we shot, that's my daughter, Sarah. She's in Colorado.
Sorry.
She's in Colorado. I took her to KU. She didn't want to go.
I think she's wearing a Jayhawk shirt there.
I am.
Yeah.
I am too. Hi, sorry.
Hey, that's all right. Rock chalk.
I had to come pick up my shipping.
All right.
All right, sorry to interrupt.
She
No,
probably
you're
got
good,
that
you're
from
good.
a visit.
She goes to Colorado, but still rocking that Jayhawk shirt. So
I flew her out after that Kansas City, Indianapolis game because she had gotten accepted, and she also got accepted at Colorado. And I don't know, I tried.
there's the people can build relationships with the university in all different ways, and it seems like she's got a pretty positive relationship with the university, is my guess, regardless if she's at Colorado or not.
Yeah, but anyways, forgotten where I was.
You were talking about Shared Silence.
I think that's the name of it.
I'm going to find out if it's in the archives for you.
I have it on 3/4 tape, and I hope it's still good, but if you can find like a 3/4 deck to play it in.
I have a contact at the Spencer Research Library where all the university archives are. And I'm going to drop her a note and just see if it's there. I'll find out for you.
I should take a look at it again. I probably haven't seen it since we shot it.
Hey, I also like to give information back to alumni when I talk with them. So an interesting thing, just to kind of put in the back of your head is that, the video group that does all the filming for the athletic department at all the games or what have you, they're called Rock Chalk Video. And I give them a lot of credit. I know some of the people that work there, and when I worked in athletics, and we had a great relationship. But I've had 2 different students in the last 5 years who have gotten jobs when they were freshmen with Rock Chalk Video, and who have worked their way through learning how to use different equipment, different software, who have been in some of the same situations that you described yourself being in for Sunflower, on the floor at Allen Fieldhouse, doing different things, up in the production room at Memorial Stadium. And it's been, by both accounts, wonderful experience for them. And one of my students who's now graduated, Travis Calvin, he basically has gone to the University of Wyoming to be a part of their athletic department video team. So he transferred that undergraduate experience immediately into a job at a Division I university doing another Division I university doing their sports behind the camera stuff. So yeah, it's been, whenever I get a student who comes into my world that's like, I'd like to work in film and media production and sports, I always try to turn them on to Rock Chalk Video.
Yeah, I think that's probably, well, that's like huge. I know of a bunch of kids at universities, and I even when you go to pro teams and their video departments they've exploded, and they're doing, you know, the media, the social media that, you know, these teams are doing, just these quick little uploads to full shows. It's really exploded.
Yeah. Well, would love to have you join a network call, maybe, you know, later in the spring or next fall. We did a Jayhawks and Sports network call this past fall. We had over 40 people on it. It included people that worked for the 49ers, the Mavericks, the Dallas Stars. There were people that owned their own like sports media companies on there. It was great. It was great to talk to people. They're all Jayhawks. It was really fun. So I'll personally let you know when we're going to do one of those again, and we'd love to have you there. And it's like, there's no prep, no pressure. It's just, you know, coming and networking, doing the things that you suggested, just networking with other people that are kind of in your industry.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate you reaching out. I joined this mentoring, this online mentoring thing a while ago, and in hopes of, I've always tried to help kids here out at NBC. Before many years ago, it was just, hey, I know this person, meet and greet and try and get an internship. Now they've kind of, with things happening at NBC, they've kind of centralized it. And I think it's called College to Careers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you go to NBC Careers, you can look at that, but it kind of, I couldn't even get my own daughter an internship for this past Olympics. It's really tough to get, especially with the Olympics. Kids come out of the woodwork for it. So it's, but I was hoping to do a little more than what I've done, and I think that's partially my fault. But I'm more than happy to help out any way I can, and I greatly appreciate you reaching out to me for this.
Well, this has been a delight. It's good to know you, and as always, Rock Chalk.
Rock Chalk, Jayhawk.